Hello and welcome back, everybody, to the Influxer educational series, summer 2023. And really excited today. I've got a friend and somebody that is ingrained in this NIL atmosphere, or whatever we want to call it. Alexis Henderson Barlow, the Chief Operating Officer from SANIL, Student Athlete NIL. Uh, I'll spell it out. Now, I think how many people say no?
A lot. It's
Okay.
Sunil.
Okay. All right. Thanks for correcting me. I can be wrong sometimes. I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I'm really excited to have Alexis on today because she has a lot of great experience working with a lot of different collectives around the country. And actually, when I've had a few questions myself, she's been a great source of information, a great sounding board. And, it's good to have friends, and it's good to be able to talk through this stuff. And, I think, sometimes the general public doesn't understand sometimes that, a lot of the NIL companies, we do talk with each other. And, I'm going to avoid the word collusion because that's a nasty, nasty word these days. But we do share some of the wisdom, some of the tips and tricks, and some of the experiences to make sure student athletes have a good experience with this. So, uh, Alexis, tell, before we get moving on this, tell us a little bit about your pathway into where you are today.
Sure. And I mean, I know you say, collusion, but it does help that we are colleagues and
Mhm.
we have definitely have that Marquette connection. But yeah, so I am a former women's basketball player. I played basketball at Xavier University in Cincinnati. I knew I wanted to work in athletics because it's the only, I grew up playing all kinds of sports. So, sport management, sport marketing. I had two stints right after I graduated in marketing at the University of Evansville and then at the NCAA. And then I went back to school. I went to Marquette Law School, earned my JD in 2010, and also my sports law certificate, which is where our connection comes in, Keith, which is awesome. After that, I have worked at a bunch of different universities in marketing and fan engagement, New Mexico, Vanderbilt, the University of North Carolina, and then I was at the University of South Florida. And then just through, all of the people that I've met over the years, I met the CEO of Student Athlete NIL, Jason Belzer, and I've been with Cineol since October of 2022. So almost 9 months. It's been a whirlwind, but that's kind of, everybody has a different backstory, I think, as you'll learn as you talk to different people, but that's mine, and it's all over the place, but that's how I got where I am.
I think that's been my observation just in becoming friends with you and talking with you is you're coming from this background. I mean, yes, we do have the same similar legal background, and I went the compliance route, you went the fan engagement and marketing route, um,
Yep.
which I think is a phenomenal way to look at this. Sometimes I think I missed the boat by not doing that kind of thing, but I've really enjoyed my compliance career though as well.
I
You're
feel the
still
same way. So I
okay.
feel like I missed the boat not going the compliance route, but I know we've talked about this before, but there's a time and a place. And when I graduated from law school, the country was in a gigantic recession and no one was hiring, and
Yeah.
they were hiring in marketing. And when you need a job, you go back to where, you have your experience, and that's just kind of the route that I stuck with. But no, you're like, I missed the boat on marketing. I'm like, I totally missed the boat on compliance, but it happens the way it happens.
Well, it's good that we're able to share those experiences and bring each other back to base, home base, I guess. But
Yep.
so today we're going to talk a little bit about collectives, and first, let's start off easy because there's a lot of people that are watching this. Some people are super familiar with what we're talking about most of the times on these educational live streams. And then some people are really just kind of dipping their toes in trying to learn some of the basics here. And so I'm going to hit you with kind of the first question that I think I probably have gotten a lot over time, and I'm sure you've gotten. Uh, I'm pretty sure you've probably got a better response than I have. But every once in a while, when I run into somebody that is not super familiar with college athletics in general, but they're starting to get interested because of a lot of the headlines that are out there, they ask, "What is a collective?" And a very basic question, and I've heard many different explanations as to what they are, and some of those explanations have us come from a very certain viewpoint, and then some I think are very well balanced opinions or definitions on this. I want to hear it from the chief operating officer of you know yeah, what do you got on this?
So I will explain what our Cineo collectives, what we serve and function as. So the goal for all of our collectives is not necessarily to compensate student athletes, but rather just to create that seamless conduit between fans and brands who are interested in engaging with student athletes in return for tangible benefits and then a return on your investment. So the easiest way to put it in layman's terms nowadays is that prior to July or June of 2021, student athletes were not able to get paid for doing anything, for signing autographs, for making appearances, for promoting a business, or allowing folks to use their image on a billboard. That wasn't permitted, and so now it is. However, the universities are not allowed to be involved in facilitating those types of deals for student athletes. So our company and the collectives that we manage serve as a third party agency of record. So we're walking a parallel path with the school while not being involved with the school. So we serve as their agency of record for all of the NIL transactions with our student athletes. So that we evaluate and manage the incoming NIL requests from bands, businesses, and brands. And then we identify which partnerships we think will align with the student athletes, as well as the sponsor's goals. And then negotiating those partnerships between the sponsor and the student athlete, and then defining those deliverables that the student athletes need to complete, making sure that they're in compliance with the university, the state, federal, and NCAA rules. And then we also provide payment to the student athletes once they have completed what is in the contract.
You've provided this explanation a few times, I can tell. Just a few.
It's pretty good. It's for me, it's very easy on my end. I do think that I'm sure you've heard a lot of different explanations for what collectives do, but that's what the main purpose of our collectives is.
And I know, we're kind of early. I mean, we're still in the infancy period, I feel like, with NIL. And I still think things are going to continue to evolve and change over the, who knows what this looks like in year 5 or year 6. I think there's just going to be, this constant evolution. And I know that's something that you and I talked about is, how do we adapt? How do we stay on top of, all the changes? And, I certainly see collectives, having a huge impact and having a huge part of the growth in the NIL sector. It is interesting, though, to me, as we kind of look at some of this, I see some of the collectives, in the country, I'll see the headlines, this one is no longer in existence, or, there's a merging of two collectives, or maybe 3 collectives. And now we're starting to see partnerships from one school's collective to another school's collective. So I think the collectives, along with everybody else in this business, we're starting to learn, kind of what is the best path forward, and we're learning, maybe, I don't know if we want to call them failures or mistakes, or best practices, but we're all learning like different ways to thrive, moving forward. What has been your observation, like, and what do you kind of see moving forward, in terms of the role of collectives, that relationship with the university, because we're obviously in a time period where there could be legislation any day that feels like we get new legislation or proposed every day at least. But I'd love to hear what your perspective is, and because I think you're coming from a very well balanced, viewpoint, and just your experience and kind of what you've been working with. And so I think what your insight is going to be tremendously valuable to, folks that are out there. Maybe some of the, collectives that aren't working with somebody like you. And I think your perspective is going to be, quite valuable.
Gosh. Okay. I think that this is a loaded question. So I'm going to start with, it's one of my favorite, I don't know what the right word is, but when you're using your toothpaste and you squeeze the toothpaste out of the can or the tube, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Like, just think about it. You squeezed it out and you're like, shoot, I already have it out. You can't. It's not like peanut butter where you can scoop it back in and make it nice and pretty again. So that's my, I guess, my analogy for kind of how NIL started, like the toothpaste out of the can. And I think now it's like, how do we try to get it back in? And I don't know that you can. I know there's a lot of talk about regulating from, the state and federal and NCAA level. I don't really know. I'm so interested as well to see how that is all going to pan out. I do think that I've talked about this a lot, that the market is going to self-correct. I think that, and I've noticed it, a lot of NIL is donor funded, or it's, partnership funded. There's a lot of money on the table, and it's hard to keep filling your coffers, when you're going to the same well. And right now that's a donor well, or that's like a big company in town that is happy to fund it. But it needs to be reoccurring revenue that's supporting these student athletes and the collectives themselves. So I think it's going to switch from being donor funded heavily in the first year or two. And you're going to see that donor fatigue is real. Like, you're paying student athletes, whether it's to promote or to represent you or to represent your brand. And it's, I can't imagine just continuing to give and give and give and not see that there's any sort of, end to the giving, right? So you're not necessarily, like, donors that are giving aren't necessarily getting a return on their investment. They're writing a check, and the check is going to the student athlete. So I think that there's a lot of money right now that's on the table. I do think that well is going to run dry. And so that's where our goal is to get that reoccurring revenue, whether that's through collective memberships, whether that's through business partners that are partners with the collective. So I think that's the direction that it's trending in. And when I say I think the market's going to correct itself, I think that you're going to have your 10 or 15, maybe even 25 schools that have that annual, like, millions and millions of dollars coming to the collective. The rest of the world is not. And all the kids that are making crazy amounts of money right now, they're still going to make a lot of money, but it's going to level itself out to where, maybe that 6-figure contract is now like in $25,000 or $50,000 a year, as opposed to, a 6-figure contract. That's not sustainable, is what I'm trying to say. And so I don't know if it can be regulated from a state, federal, NCAA. Like I said, the toothpaste is out of the can. So I'm very interested to see if they're able to achieve that. But in lieu of that, I do think it's going to regulate, because, the money is gonna run out.
Right. No, all really good points. And I mean, definitely, for me, I'm working a little bit with some collectives here, not to the extent you are. And, you pointed out to me that a long time ago, you got to have a plan for the reoccurring revenue. Because yes, donor fatigue is real. It's definitely out there. And, I hear the phrases, what's the return on investment? What's the ROI? As a compliance guy, ROI was not something we always talked about. But, definitely, as we get into the marketing to the development realm, that's obviously a term you're used to seeing. And so I know that is one of the valuable things that you pointed out to me early on, just kind of with what you're seeing. All right, so just I'm gonna hike it back just a little bit, because there's a lot of smaller schools out there. The big
Mhm.
schools, they're having no problems in general in terms of like getting that donor support, the business support. I'm gonna say in general. Maybe there's some exceptions out there, but there's a lot of smaller schools that don't have a collective set up right now, and there's some interest, maybe not a lot, but there's a little bit of interest, from some of the smaller schools. Aside from calling you, how do they know, if they've got the appropriate amount of interest that makes this real, that makes them picking up the phone call to you, we're ready to go? I mean, do you kind of gauge that? Do you talk them through that and say, you guys aren't quite ready yet?
So one of the things I hear our CEO say a lot is that every school has a capacity for NIL. So it's different. So, like you're saying, if you're one of the smaller schools, you still have that ability to create an NIL program. And so that it just means that the level that you are starting at is a little bit different than some of the bigger schools. I think the interest, I there needs to be buy-in from everyone. So that means like your development office, your external office, you know, the folks that are, surrounding the team that are like friends of the program that are giving to development potentially, that there needs to be a shift, or instead of giving 100% of your donation to development, potentially you're giving 25 to the NIL program. And I think once everybody is, walking the same road, saying the same things, it helps, fans and potential contributors feel better about where their funds are going. If you've got, it's a little bit of an internal battle sometimes with some of the smaller schools, and that's okay. They need the funds for the new stadium. They need the funds for that locker room, or um, you know, just essentials for their athletic department. So they may not necessarily be as concerned with NIL as their coach that has a top 50 player that, is going to win conference athlete of the year and then potentially leave.
Right.
So I think getting all of the main constituents on board and literally walking the same path is important. And once you have that, you'll see that, like I said, folks feel more comfortable saying, okay, I'm going to give, part of my contribution is going to go to NIL, but everybody's got to be on board with that, because, you've got your MMR partners, you've got everybody is still trying to tap into those same dollars. And so if, half of the, department is on board with it and the other half is like, well, we need this money to go elsewhere, it kind of stalls the process a little bit. So getting everybody on the same page and seeing the value of NIL is important. I always say it's a circle, and it doesn't, it really doesn't matter which way your circle's going, but NIL is a new part of recruiting. It's just like the arms race that was 10 years ago, when football stadiums, basketball, you had to have the Rolls Royce, the video boards, all that. Yeah. NIL is sort of taken a step in there. And so, NIL is important to potentially recruiting, to retaining your roster, which is important for winning. And when you're winning, folks are like, okay, let's continue to give back to the school. And so if you can't build a successful program and continue to keep it being successful, those funds are going to drop off. So NIL is just a little stop on that circle of trying to get that winning program, right, so that people will contribute. So yeah.
Yeah, no, all great points. Definitely, as I've been out and about, visiting a lot of schools, doing education, that's my favorite thing to do, is get up in front of a crowd and, talk to folks. But there's not always, but I've had a few instances where you've got a kind of a nervous development officer that's, what are you saying to comfort them? I know what I'm saying. And, and a lot of times, I'm telling them, you got to take a step back and look at what the future is here, and visit with your coaches, visit with your AD. Maybe if there is a need to redefine some of the expectations to some degree here. And the same expectations of a development officer 5 years ago, they should be looking very different today, in some regard. And yeah, that does put a crimp on some budgets, but I mean, it's like you said, it's an arms race. It is a different type of arms race where the money's not all going to go the same route. But what are you saying to comfort them? I mean, I'm encouraging the visit, with the coaches and the AD, and maybe redefining that stuff. But maybe you got a magic pill that you're able to pass out, and you get those development officers to not be as nervous.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's really goes back to getting everyone on the same page and seeing the value of NIL. And if they don't see that value, then the collective itself is going to struggle.
Right.
I don't know that there's a collective out there that is wildly successful that has not been backed by, the university. And that's not the school being involved. That's the school saying, we place a value on NIL and we support this collective. They can support all the collectives if they want, but we support our fan base, our businesses contributing to NIL. It doesn't mean they don't want them to continue to be a partner with the school, but it's like, please
Right.
also consider giving to this. So fans are loyal to the schools. They look to the schools for guidance, which is why sometimes it's really confusing when collectives pop up, because people don't know who they're giving their money to, and it's not the school. And so they're so ingrained in, I write my check to the school every year. I know exactly where it's going. It's going to this fund. And then NIL pops up and the schools aren't allowed to be involved. So for us, my biggest thing is, if you want it to be successful, you have to support it, or at least say like, hey, yes, this is our collective. This is where we would like, if you would like to support NIL, this is where you need to go. If you're a lot of schools that, they don't want to make a statement at all, your fan base isn't going to trust that this is the collective for the school. So you're kind of, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. So if you're not supporting a collective, but that's also, you need to trust the organization that is running it. You need to trust the folks that are behind it. Because the worst case scenario is, you hear about it in the news. So you don't want that. But I have these conversations with folks every day about, I usually give here. Now they're asking me to give here. And it's just kind of helping them understand that, we're not a part of the school, but, we're working to achieve these goals for the university and their student athletes.
The elephant in the room, taxes, the IRS. I don't want to put you on the spot too much, and I don't want you to make you uncomfortable, but I'm sure you're getting the donors and the businesses that are worried about, gosh, is this going to be a tax deductible thing? Or, where are you all at? And I think, as the federal government moves on, and as we continue to see proposals put forward, I think we're going to see different things out there to help address, these types of issues. But, in the current climate, I mean, how are you, what's some pieces of comfort you can give to some folks, or some wisdom or tidbits, whatever? Maybe you don't have any comfort. I don't know. But love to hear kind of how you put that message out there to folks you're working with.
So I think the IRS, the memo that they sent out that said that, they don't look at collectives that are 501c3s as a viable option. I think that was a long time coming. I think that there are collectives that are set up as 501c3s that are doing it very well and to the letter of the law, but having a collective that, is solely based on your contributors getting a tax write-off, that's not the purpose of a 501c3. A 501c3 is for, charitable works. And there's just a really like hard line between, I want to give you a ton of money to pay student athletes, but I also want a tax write-off, as opposed to, here's the funds. The only work these student athletes are doing is with charities. It's a very, like, to me, it's a very distinct line, and there's not very many collectives out there that are only working with, charitable organizations. We don't, our best practice is to not have a 501c3 that is involved in a collective. I think the majority of what you're seeing folks doing, it's not charitable work. Like, you're not giving money to a charitable cause. You're giving money to kids to promote your brand, to stay on a team. They're getting paid for the use of their name, image, and likeness, not because of the kind of work that they're doing. So I agree with the IRS, and but I do think that there's collectives out there that were set up and founded on that charitable base. The other big issue is, if you're working out of a 501c3, the amount of the compensation has to be commensurate with the work that they're doing. So these 6-figure contracts don't add up to kids posting on social media or doing a 1-hour appearance. That's a big red flag right there. So our best practice is to set up all of our collectives as commercial entities.
Yeah, I mean, you know this, and I think a lot of people know that I'm a bit of a nerd when it comes to the international stuff, and I love working with the international student athletes and tackling those issues. And had a lot of, I did a presentation down at NACTA on this, and had a lot of follow-ups from a lot of different people. There were several things that triggered some eyes to open and jaws to drop, but one of them actually surrounded some of the collective activities. So kind of as we were talking about, I just got photo bombed by my son. That's awesome. Or video bombed. But with the way like immigration law works, if a international student athlete is volunteering for community service, but other folks that are domestic that are also doing the volunteer service, if the domestic kids are getting paid, then the international student athletes, their activity is also going to be considered employment as well, which is going to be a problem for a lot of the student athletes that are here on F1 visas, which is, I'm not statistically correct. I don't know what the percentage is, but it's 99% of the student athletes are F1 visa students. And I know when I said that in Orlando, there were some folks that didn't contemplate that, and they didn't quite. And I think there are a number of people around the country that have shied away from doing stuff with international student athletes just in general, because there's some timid pieces to it. But I know some others are, well, we're not seeing anybody get loaded onto a plane and shipped off to their country, so it must be okay. And truth is, no, that's not really, that should not be your measure for what's okay. But
right.
Yeah, but it's interesting though. I said it for a while. I'm not sure how this is a tax deductible thing, and I've advised a few collectives, and I in my own mind I had thought about it, and I'm looking at the IRS regulations, and I'm like, this needs to be a for-profit entity. I know after talking with you and a few other colleagues, I was like, yeah, okay, I'm not out in left field here.
I think when you look at the law around 501c3s and all of the measurements you have to do and the transparency of everything, you have to have a board, like everything has to be separate. It's just, there's a lot of red flags around it. And at the end of the day, I don't necessarily think that NIL has anything to do with any kind of charitable work. I think some of it could. I think some of it is all about charitable work. But the crux of how much some of these student athletes are getting paid is not in line with how a 501c3 works.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. You know, definitely kind of as we move forward, I think there is going to be a lot of self-correction here, just
I do too.
across the board. I think, as the IRS, Homeland Security, as Congress, as everybody's trying to struggle and get some handle on a lot of these things, I think we will see a little more correction. For folks like us, we're asking when, but
Yeah.
that's the tough
Well, I
part.
mean, there's always going to be, there's always going to be this, like I don't know if this is, but the haves and the have-nots, and you know, not every Power Five is going to have donors that are willing to keep on giving millions of dollars a year for these teams, and so I also think that you know younger kids they're I don't know, I don't even know the right way to say this, but they think that they are worth a lot more than they are because of how much everyone else is getting paid. So they're like, oh, I have that many social media followers. I'm an all conference player. I should be getting what they're getting. And I think that self correction is going to be when everyone takes a hit, like when those massive contracts start coming down and down and down. And then, I'm sure the kids talk. They have, your on three evaluations and all of those things. I think when all of that starts to like everyone's amount is going down, the kids are going to be like, oh, okay, well, this is acceptable because this is what everyone else is getting. It's kind of like the job market. Like there's a minimum and a maximum, and you fall in the middle. There's a range for each type of job, whatever level that you're at. I think we're going to see that. Hopefully, I don't know if it's going to be soon. It could be 5 or 6 years from now.
Yeah.
But like I said, the well is going to run dry, and I think it's going to come down, and so egos and all the things.
All right, you're being awesome. You're answering all the tough questions. You're hitting it. You're not shying away. That's what I love about you. You speak. You make everything very digestible, and you're like what's the old reference? A duck that's swimming, or feet underwater. You're going a million miles, but up top you're calm, and you do a really good job. So I'm gonna give you a couple of easy questions here, because I think number one, I think anybody that's watching and listening in on this conversation, they're gleaning some really cool aspects to about collectives and kind of what some of us are thinking, and there's a lot of good resources out there for a lot of folks. In terms of collectives, I found you to be just one of the outstanding resources out in this area. So appreciate you being willing to share a lot of this stuff. But easy question. 9 months ago, a year ago, before you got into this, what thing about the role you're in now, when you look back on it, you're like, gosh, I really didn't expect that. I was not expecting it. This is kind of shocking. I'll tell you mine.
Yeah, tell me yours and I'll think about it.
All right. So mine was when I left campus to this role that I'm in now. I was worried I wasn't going to have enough contact with student athletes that I'm used to over the last 25 years, and honestly, that's not been the case. I still have a lot of contact. It's just more widespread. Student athletes from all these different universities. So I've actually been really satisfied with that. But what I didn't expect was the majority of phone calls I get all happen in the afternoon and in the evening. I don't get many during the morning, and I don't know why that is.
Oh, I do. I'll tell you why.
Okay, we're the last thought of the day or something. I don't know why that is, but I've learned. All right, I'm going to sleep in a little bit, and because I know any point from I might be up to midnight, answering a casual call that I get from somebody, and and if I'm not mistaken, you signed Hawaii, or you're working with Hawaii now.
Yep.
How in the world you are managing that time zone with everything else is that's a whole separate question, because the time zones is definitely one of those factors in all the calls. But let's hear your theory here.
I don't know if I don't know if I necessarily thought I was gonna miss anything. I mean, working from home is obviously sometimes a challenge. Being, used to being in an athletic department, you have your office, people pop
Mhm.
in. So I do sometimes miss that. I miss being involved in the games and that kind of thing. But I can tell you, okay, I feel everything you're saying about the time zones. So I'm on the East Coast, and we have collectives all across the country, including Hawaii. So um, I just when I see the phone go off at like 8 o'clock at night and it's someone from California, I just kind of am aware that it's 5 o'clock their time. So, I also just kind of, I don't necessarily say I'm on the East Coast all the time, but I will just say like, hey, is tomorrow okay? First thing tomorrow, okay. That is definitely challenging. What I've noticed a lot is that a lot of the folks that are involved in the collectives, whether it's their board or it's not their full-time job.
Right.
It's their side job, or it's their passion to support the student athletes at the school, but they have a regular job from 9 to 5. And 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, they're at home and they're like, oh, I'm gonna turn on my collective brain. And that's why everybody calls later on. It's very, very interesting. But when you look at, they all have jobs. Like, this isn't their full-time job. Hawaii is a fun one because I'm always guessing what time it is over there. But, also you just have to give people grace. Like, they know that we're 6 hours ahead. So I might answer them in the morning. But I also know that I don't need to call them or text them at 10 a.m. my time because it's 4 a.m. their time. So I do try to be aware of that, but it's more so just kind of understand. NIL never sleeps. That's one thing. Okay, that's the one thing that I don't know that I was ready for.
It
It
doesn't. It
it
doesn't sleep
it
at all.
never
There's no
it
rest.
it never sleeps. And you know, I guess when you're working for a school, you're so focused on the news from that school, right? Like, you're zoned in, or maybe that conference. I cannot open Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or TikTok even without seeing NIL news, whether it's positive or negative, whether it's a deal, whether it's, commentary on it. It never ever stops, which is wild. I wasn't ready for that because sometimes you need to be able to decompress and get away from it. And for me, that's not opening social media.
Yeah, yeah. I'm on vacation right now. If you can't tell,
Yeah,
I'm in Wisconsin. I'm visiting the old stomping grounds for both
love
you
that.
and I. Enjoying the Northwoods here, and it's a working vacation.
Yeah,
So I'm still getting the phone calls, and
yeah,
um, most people are understanding. But for me, working with a lot of international student athletes, those time zones have been wacky for me, and but it all works out in the end. I feel like you and I have talked about this a few times, where leaving a campus role to be on the other side, as people will say. I've always kind of thought about it as, we got into this business to make a difference, make an impact on student athlete lives, and we're still doing that. We're just, albeit from a slightly different angle, different position here. You feel that way still?
about what?
Make
About why I
being
got
able to,
into it, making a
yeah, being
difference.
able to make an impact here, still making a difference.
I do. I just think it's a different perspective,
Yeah.
going from making sure that fans are entertained and that they have giveaways and that, everything on the video board is correct and that there's nothing spelled wrong, to um, you know, on the other side of it, I understand the administration side really, really well because I've worked with so many of them for so long. So I feel like that is an asset. For me, is just, I know how the inner workings of an athletic department works. So for me, I understand the questions that they're asking, why they're asking. Um, it's just a different. It's just I'm just facing a different direction. Like, you know, in my previous roles, it was always external facing, and this is more definitely internal, behind the scenes, making sure that everything is running smoothly. So I mean, I like that, and obviously we want all of these collectives to be successful for the student athletes at the schools and also for the schools as well. So it's just facing a completely different direction is the way I would say it.
Yeah, yeah. I I agree. I've been very happy with my transition to this role and being able to provide a good service. And I like doing these talks, with a lot of friends in the industry and being able to, kick out good info and good information for them. Um, we probably I probably not hit some of the things that you might want to share. So first, um, are there other tidbits, some other golden wisdom that you might be able to share? And then, of course, I want you to plug Student Athlete NIL, and gives people a way to contact you if maybe they got a little budding interest in starting a collective at their school. How to best reach you.
Yeah, for sure. I think the only thing you touched on it briefly, but the international student athletes and um, just to be very, very careful.
Hmm.
And obviously, like I just think just because Homeland Security or the government officials, they're not like deporting kids, that doesn't mean that they're not going to stop them from coming back into the United States. So
Exactly.
that's something to be very cognizant of. And you know just following those rules to a T, and not it's also not allowing them to work in the United States, but also the perception of them
That's right.
working. So if you're having them, sign autographs, even though they're not getting paid, but everyone else is getting paid, and then, your teammate posts about the autograph session and you're in the picture, and it's an NIL deal, like thanking the collective and your international student athletes in the photo, you just need to be aware of those kinds of things. It's the actual work and the perception of that work being done. Um, so yeah, I mean that's your specialty. But yeah, no, I don't know. My all of our emails at Sunil are, mine's Alexis, Alexis at studentathletenil.com. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't need to plug. It's just talking with you is just great.
Oh, I appreciate. Oh man, yeah, and I believe we're going to be up in
Yeah.
Marquette later this
Yeah.
fall. Oh boy,
In October, it'll probably be snowing. I can't wait.
yeah, yeah. I'm excited about that. That'll be a lot of fun. Um, you know, you've been an absolute blast, and I appreciate the friendship and being able to bounce stuff off of you. And I think that's something that the general public, or even some of the universities don't understand, is there is some sharing going on behind the scenes to
Yeah.
um, I mean, because none of us want to get a student athlete in trouble. You know, and maybe, there, of course, there's going to be some folks out there that aren't sharing or aren't communicating, and maybe they don't have their radar up for all the problems that we do. I appreciate the shout out on the international. That's
Yep.
something I love doing. And I know my video's gotten watched a few times, so that I did on this one, but you're 100% right. I mean, I tell people all the time, Homeland Security is not really something you want to mess with or tempt or tease, and for a variety of different reasons. And it is important to cross the T's, dot the I's on that area when it comes to NIL. And I still see a few things out there, just like you do, on Twitter and social media, and I'm like, I just grimace,
Yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, you shouldn't be doing that, but.
I mean, and the other thing too about NIL, I think also that surprised me. I don't know what I thought. I don't know if I thought it was going to be really hard, or I just don't know, but it's really not that difficult. And I think people make it like it's this complicated. It's not. And I
Mhm.
think that was surprising as well. But um, yeah, I don't know. It's not that difficult. So
Yeah, but folks need a little reassurance every once in a while that what they're doing is correct, and that's that's why we're here, help provide that
yep.
reassurance. So, Alexis, I can't thank you enough for joining us today, and I'm sure this link will be up for that YouTube right after this, and so you can watch and critique yourself. Like I'm going to give you some
I'm
advice.
definitely not gonna do that.
Yeah, don't do it. I made a habit of
Not
not
gonna do that.
reviewing it and just,
No.
yeah, just giving you, friend to friend, don't do it. You did great.
No.
Appreciate that.
Thanks. It was great.
Thanks,
Thank you
Alexa.
for having me. All right.
Bye, everybody.